Okay, we're in Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Got it. We're 4 lines from the top, 3 words from the end of the line. So we're still in the middle of our mini Medrash Rabbah on Megillah Esther. This is going to continue until Tez Zayin Amud Beis. It's going to go on for a while. All right. Wait, should we wait for Alan to come back? Okay. Rabbi Yochanan Amar the Olam in Binyamin Kasi. So this was the question exactly. Who did Mordechai come from? Did he come from Yehuda? Or did he come from Binyamin? Right. So we said really he came from. So we said well really from both, and we said no, maybe he came from Binyamin. My Karila Yehudi. So why then is he called Yehudi Ish Yehudi? Al-Shum Shekafa B'Avodah Zarah, because anybody who denies Avodah Zarah is considered a Yehudi. That's by the definition. Shekol HaKofa Avodah Zarah Nikra Yehudi Kediksiv, as it says with respect to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and there was a description of the Jews who were set over the affairs of Babel. It says Iti Guvrin Yehudayin, that there were certain Jews. Daniel was mentioned amongst them. Of course, he was from Sheva Yehuda, but the other three. Look in the Masoret Tashas, so he says this is going according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Nachmedi in Sanhedrin, who says that Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah came from the other Shvatim, other than that did not come from Shevet Yehuda. So you could say they came from Shevet Binyamin. Rabbi Shimon Ben Pazi, you have a pasuk with Divrei Hayamim. Rabbi Shimon Ben Pazi, along these lines, not that we're doing a new medrash on Divrei Hayamim, but just to highlight the point. That if a person who repudiates Avodah Zarah is considered a Yehudi, said that in Divrei Yamim Amahachi, he would say the following: called Varecha Echad Heim. That sometimes you have psukim in Divrei Yamim where there are a bunch of names, but it really is the same person just described in the different names. One of the Meforshim in the back who goes further and says that the idea of Divrei Yamim is that there is like a strand of interpretation in Divrei Yamim. You have to know how to darshan Divrei Yamim. The Divrei Yamim is not meant necessarily to be taken literally. And you have to understand that it's not necessarily when it comes to Divrei Yamim. But on the Yad in the darshan, he says, and we know how to darshan. Not everybody knows how to darshan. V'ishto Yehudia Yolda is Yered. It says that the Jewish woman, the Yehudia woman, gave birth to Yered, and here we'll see this is referring to Bitya. It's talking to, the name that we've come up with, of course, is Batya, but it's referring to, as the pasuk refers to, as Bitya, who gave birth to Bitya, daughter of Paro, who gave birth to Yered, Avigador, Veschever, Avi Socho, Vesikutiel, Avi Zanoach, Ve'elu b'nei Bitya bas Paro. And these are all the children of Bitya bas Paro, Shalakach Merid, who was married by Merid. Merid was Kalev, according to this tradition. Kalev ben Yehuda ended up marrying Bas Paro. So Amai Karila Yehudia. So why is she referred to as Yehudia? This Bisya Bas Paro. Al-Shum Shekafa B'Avodah Zarah, because of the fact that she repudiated Avodah Zarah. So here we are able to highlight the point once again to reinforce the point that the name Yehudi doesn't necessarily mean that you come from Sheva Yehuda, but just that you repudiate Avodah Zarah. She went to wash and she went to immerse by the river. Rabbi Yochanan, that this was meant to be a tefillah for the purpose of gerus, at least in terms of purifying herself from the contamination of Avodah Zarah. She was purifying herself from the idols of her father's house. So it says Yolda. What do you mean she gave birth to Moshe? Yocheved gave birth to Moshe. Aribu says she just raised Moshe. So Lama Lacha, this teaches you, this is one of the Gemaras that are quoted in the context of the Chuvas about adoption. She called him Megadol, Yosam B'Yisoma B'Sok Beisam Ale Alavakasav Kilu Yoldo. That if you raise an orphan, it's considered somebody who doesn't have their natural parent to raise them, and it's considered as if you've actually given birth to them. Yered's Moshe, and then when it says she gave birth to Yered, so the person she raised wasn't Yered, it was Moshe. But why is he called Yered? Because the mon from heaven fell from heaven during his days in his chus. He's called Abi Gedor because he was able to patch up the breaches that have been caused by the misbehavior of the Jews. Similarly, he was called Chaver because of the fact that he was able to connect It's a lashon of cheber. He was able to connect the Jewish people to their Father in heaven. Socho, he was called Socho Shenase Lehem Yisod B'Sukkah, that he created protection for the Jewish people, like a sukkah. Yekutiel, he was called Yekutiel Shekava Yisod Kel B'Yamo, because the Jews forged a hope, a yearning towards Hakadosh Baruch Hu in his days. Zenoach means that she's niach avnosean she Yisrael, that he abandoned or denounced the sins of the Jewish people, that he was able to cleanse them. Abi. There are 3 times in the pasuk that he's referred to as Abi, right? So it says Abi Gedor, Abi Socho, and Abi Zenoach. So he was an Ab b'Torah. He was a father of the people in terms of teaching them Torah. Ab b'Chachma, he was their father when it came to Chachma. Ab b'Nevias, and he was their father when it came to leading them in prophecy. Be'ela b'nei Bitya, and these are the children of Bitya. As we said, they're all Echadim. It's all the same person. It's all referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, son of Bitya, daughter of Paro, Asher Lakach Mered, who was married by Mered. Mered? He married Shemo. He wasn't. His name wasn't Mered. Mered Shemo, although Kalev Shemo. It was Kalev, according to our tradition, who married Bas Paro. So Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yavo, that this is a proper shidduch. Yavo Kalev, Shemod Batzas Meraglim, Kalev should come along, who rebelled against the fellow Meraglim, who were plotting against the land of Israel. And he said, I'm not like you guys. But he says Bas Paro, and he would be an appropriate shidduch to marry the daughter of Paro. Kalev could marry more than one woman. Shemarda Begilule Beis, because he also married Miriam, right? Shemarda Begilule Beis Avia, who rebelled against the idols of her father's house. So therefore, it's a good shidduch. So now we're continuing in the psukim of Megillas Esther. We're still in the second parak, right? Asher Hagla Mirushalayim. So Amarava Shegala Me'atzmo. So Asher Hagla doesn't sound like anybody else was putting him into Galus. Asher Hagla sounds like it was reflexive. He did it to himself, meaning that he was not forced into exile like most of the other Jews, but rather he was like Yirmiyahu. That Yirmiyahu, right? Because it doesn't say Asher Hayamin Hagola Asher Haglasa. It just says he himself was Asher Hagla. That like Yirmiyahu, like the Medrash says, Yirmiyahu was given the choice that he could have stayed in the land of Israel, but and so too. He also had the choice that whether to go to Golos or not to go to Golos, and he chose to go to Golos with his brother. He omein es Hadassah, and the pasuk says that he raised Hadassah. Hadassah, we thought her name was Esther. Which is it? Is she Esther? Or is she some myrtle? So Kari la Hadassah and Kari la Esther. So Tanya Rabbi Meir Omer Esther Shema. No, her name was Esther. Don't worry. V'lamani Shema Hadassah. Why was she called Hadassah? Because she started a chapter. Al Shema Tzadikim Shenikru Hadassim, because based on the righteous people who are called Hadassim, so she too was righteous. V'cheinu Omer who are made ben Hadassim, as pasuk says in Zechariah, that referring to a tzaddik, that tzaddik stands amongst the myrtle leaves. Rabbi Yehuda amongst the myrtle branches. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hadassah Shema. Rabbi Yehuda says no, her main name was Hadassah. Esther. Why was she called Esther? Hashem Shahaisa Misteris Dvareh, that she would hide her words. She was very modest and very discreet. Shenemar, as it says, Ein Esther Magedes Sasama. She didn't tell the people who her nation was. Omer, so she was very discreet. That's why she's called Hadassah. She was a lashon of Misteris. I'm sorry, she was called Esther because she was the lashon of Misteris. Rabbi Nechemiah Omer Hadassah Shema. Rabbi Nechemiah says her name was Hadassah. V'lamani Kreis Esther. Shayu Umos Ha'olam Kohen Osa Hashum Istahar. She was called Esther based on Istahar, based on the book they just published, right? Esther, that she was like the moon. That Istahar is a lashon of the moon. That she radiated beauty, just like the moon is the moon is radiant. Ben Azai Omer Esther Lo Arucha V'Lo Kitzara Haisa El Beinonis. Ben Azai says she was just right. She was, not she was not too long and she was not too short. She was just the right. She was just the right size, right? Hadassah, just like a myrtle, is just the right size. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha Amar Esther Yirach Rokes Haisa. Shimon Korcha says, objectively speaking, Esther wasn't necessarily such a beauty. She was green. But there was a chut shel chesed, there was a string of grace that extended over her face that made her very charming to people.
Someone would say that she was greenish, jaundice.
Some say that Yerachlokas means yellow, but green, yellow, whatever it was, she was off. She was off color. Green. You could say that. You could say that. I mean, I didn't see anyone say that it was based on the color of Hadassah. I didn't see that, but it's not a bad shot. Okay. She didn't have a father and she didn't have a mother. So lamali. So why do I need her? Once I know she didn't have a father or mother, why does it have to say that what happened when her father? It says, oh, and her father and mother died. Well, you just said, I don't need a mimosa via bima. So I know that her father and mother, must have perished. So Ravacha, the idea is she never had a father or mother. It's to underscore the fact that she Pashut never had a father or mother. That the father died when the mother was pregnant, and the mother died in childbirth. So there was never a moment that she had a father or a mother. Ravacha Barta the Mesa Via. As soon as the mother got pregnant, the father died. Ladasa, as soon as the mother gave birth to her, Mesa Ima, the mother died. So then it says that when the father and mother died, Mordechai took her as a daughter. A daughter? Satana Mishum Avimei took the bas, not a daughter, and the bias, a wife. The wife is referred to as a bias, right? The Chenu Omer, the Rash ain't call, as it says when Nassan was giving the mashal to David, he didn't do the right thing in terms of Bathsheba. He gave this mashal about some poor person didn't have anything. Like this is referring to like Uriah, all he had was Bathsheba. Kiyim Kivsa Achas Katana. Just had a little lamb, or you had a little.
Are they picking up on the word lakach? That it's a lashon of nesuin?
Yes, very good. Lakach is a lashon of nesuin. Very good. That he had purchased, he only had a little lamb. And brought up this little lamb together with the rest of his family. Mipito Tochal ate from his pen, Mikosa Tishta drank from his cup of Acheko Tishkam and slept in his bosom. But Tilo Kibas, and it was like a daughter. What do you mean? Is that how you define a daughter? Somebody who sleeps next to you in the bed. Nowadays, you get into a lot of trouble. Mishum Acheko Tishka Bavaslay the Bas, that makes the person into a daughter? No, that's what happens with a wife. El Labayas, that's the idea, that she was his wife. So Chinami Labayas, it means that he took her basically as a wife, that she was married to Mordechai. And then it says that she had 7 maidens who attended her in the king's court. So Amarava Shaisa Monaben, this is how she kept track of what day it was. They didn't necessarily give her a calendar. She wanted to observe Shabbos, so she knew this was her Sunday girl, this was her Monday girl, and when she got up to the last one, she knew this is my Shabbos girl, so she knew that she was up to Shabbos. Shaisa Ben, you make Shabbos. Then it says Yeshaneves Narosea, that she was got special treatment, right? So Amrav, what was the special treatment that she got? Shechila Macho Yehudi, that she was given kosher food. Ushmuel Amar, no, that they forced her with a different pshatim as to what the next few words mean. Shechila Kidli de Chaziri. So some understand Kidli de Chaziri that it was like a fatty bacon that she was given. And according to Rashi, she was forced to eat it. Like unlike everybody else who got to eat whatever they ate, she was given this fatty bacon food, which is not kosher. But because of the fact that she was an anusa, she was forced into it, so she didn't get into trouble. So that's why Tosfos over here says Tosfos says no. Tosfos says that she didn't eat that. That can't be pshat that she would eat such a thing. What would Tosfos say? Tosfos might say like the Aruch. The Aruch says the kidlit the chaziri means it was heads of lettuce. Chazir is also chazeret. There's lashon of chazeret. Rabbi Yochanan says that she had munhum and tashin. The Chenu Omer, she had poppy seeds. That's why we have the minhag that when I was growing up, the standard type of humindashin was poppy seed, was mun humindashin. So because that's the real minhag. The real minhag is to have mun because that's zecha to the zeronim, to like the poppy seeds that Esther was fed. The Chenu Omer, like it says with respect to Hananiah, Mishael, of Azariah, that they were given special food. That they said, we don't want to eat the tray food. And they said, but you're not going to be as strong as the other lads. So Daniel was with them too at that time. When they were brought into the service, but Nebuchadnezzar said, we don't want to eat, the tray food everybody else is eating. So they said, they said, give us a chance, just feed us like some legumes, and you'll see we'll be just as strong as everybody else. And it turned out they were the strongest of all the lads who were brought in. We have Meltzer, so the waiter, Nose as pas begam and Nose Lehem Zeronim, that he gave them, this type of a food. He gave them sort of things that were like seeds, that were like poppy seeds and the like. So they managed that they subsisted with all of that rather than, the other food and drink that everybody else was eating. Okay, Shisha Chadashim Hashem and Hamor, and the maidens who were brought to be with Achashverosh, so they had the different oils that were applied on them, different cosmetics. 6 months they got myrrh oil. My Shem and Hamor, what is that exactly? I don't know. It's a certain type of sachet, a certain type of oil that's prepared with spices. It's olive oil from olives that have only grown 1/3 that are especially good. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer on pikinon, that it's a type of oil known as anpikinon. Shemen zayish lo hevi shlish, and that's really the definition. The word that we use for this type of olive oil that is from olives that are only 1/3 grown is called a pikinon. Why do they use this special type of oil? Because it causes the hair from osomokom, that area of the woman's anatomy, to fall off, so that it's clearer and smoother. And it smooths the flesh in that area as a general matter. With respect to each woman who came in to be with Achashverosh, who he was sort of trying out, she would come at night and she would go back in the morning. So he was only with her at night. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mignuso Shalos Rasha, we're talking about the shame and the disgrace of this Rasha, what he did, that he that he abused on some level all of these different women, that he was going to be with each of them and only marry one of them. But from that type of mishandling of the women, we also Lamanu Shivko, we also learned something good about him, that he was modest enough that he was only with them at night and not during the daytime. So Hayam Mishamish Mitasa Bayom, that at least it was in some sort of a more modest context. But he has there no says and it says that Esther found favor. Everybody identified with Esther. That however they would define what's a good-looking woman in their own kingdom, so Esther met the bill in everyone's estimation. But the Lakach Esther on the Melech Achashverosh, Esther was brought in to King Achashverosh, her turn. Beis Malchus. So what month was she brought in? She was brought in this month. It's in Yana Diyoma, Chodesh HaSiri, the month who Chodesh Teves. Right, this is the only book in Tanakh pretty much that tells you what the names of the months were. Right, this is a month which is a very cold month, as we know. Teves is a very cold month, or long nights, and people need some warming up, and therefore there's a greater appreciation of one body being touched by another body. So therefore, there was a greater hana that Achashverosh could get from being with her, and that would kind of give her an advantage in terms of being chosen over the other women. But you have a Melech Esther Mikol Anashim, and sure enough, the Melech loved Esther more than any of the other women. That she was better than all the mature women, and she was better than all of the virgin women, that whatever Achashverosh wanted to experience when he was with her intimately, he was able to experience. If he wanted to feel the experience of being with a basula, he felt it. If he wanted to experience the feeling of being with a more mature woman who was not a basula, then he experienced that as well. But Yas HaMelech Mishteh Gadol, the Melech made a giant feast. He really wanted her to reveal what nation she was from, but she said, nothing doing. I'm not telling you what nation I'm from. Dali Karga below Galyale. So he thought, I'm going to make a feast for her, so she'll be so appreciative of the covenant I'm showing her, she'll tell me what nation she's from. No, it didn't happen. Says, okay, well, I'll remove the tax from everybody in all of my Medinos, and she'll feel, wow, what a covenant. Because of me, she's giving amnesty to everybody. So now, I'm on safe ground. I can tell him what nation I'm from. No, she wouldn't tell him. Shadapar additionally, he sent gifts to all of his ministers in her honor. So he figured, okay, now she'll tell me. Below Gayala, she said, nope, nothing doing. I ain't telling you. And then he brought more maidens to come along. So Azul Shakal ate some in Mordechai because he asked advice of Mordechai. This is a very strange Gemara. He asked advice of Mordechai. He said, what can I do to get her to reveal the nation that she's from? So Mordechai said, no problem, because remember, Mordechai was sort of a minister in his court. So Mordechai said, I'll give you a good idea, because, I know this woman. I'll tell you what you got to do in order to get her to fess up. A woman is jealous of the thigh, meaning of the sexual competition of her friends. So bring in more basulos, and then she'll be so jealous, she'll tell you. Nonetheless, she didn't tell him. It says Esther did not reveal her nation. Maharsha says, what in the world's going on over here? It says Mordechai really didn't want Esther to be taken. We generally learned that there was all a big plot that we wanted Esther to be taken as the queen of Achashverosh. Says, no, Mordechai didn't want that at all. In fact, that's why Mordechai told her not to reveal her nation, because he figured that Achashverosh would have such scorn for somebody that wouldn't reveal her nation, and it must be that she comes from like gypsy roots or something very dishonorable, and therefore he wouldn't want to marry her. And so to here, Mordechai was giving advice in the hope that he would find one of these other maidens that he'd bring along at this point in time more attractive. He would change his mind and he wouldn't marry Esther, because Mordechai he didn't want his wife taken away from him. Very interesting. So I'm Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, what does it mean when it says Lo Yigara Mitzadik Einav? That a Kadosh Baruch Hu, this is a pasuk in Iyov, does not remove his eyes from a righteous person until that person is going to be lakisei v'yoshibim lanetzach v'yigbal, that he's going to be set on a throne, that he's going to be rewarded. So a Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't look away from those who deserve reward. So b'chskar snius shaisa ba berachel, because of the great modesty, the Rachel had Zochsa v'yatsa mimenu Shaul, so she merited to have Shaul eventually come out from her. Because several generations later, right, came along a Shaul from Binyamin, right? The Binyamin was from Rachel. V'skar tznius sheyava b'Shaul, and because of the tznius that Shaul had, Zochsa v'yatsa mimenu Esther, so he was able to have a descendant who was Esther. Who came from Shevet Binyamin, because Binyamin was Mordechai's son Binyamin, and she was Bas Dodo. What was the tznius that Rachel had? Yaakov told Rachel, "Don't worry, I'm your uncle." No, he was a cousin. Rather, he said Minsava Li. He said because he was the son of Rivka, so he said, I want you to marry me. So Amalei in. She said, sure. Mio, but I have to warn you. Full disclosure. And I don't want any nevastas over here. You should know that my father, he's he's kind of a bad guy. Mio Abba Ramahu. My father is a very conniving, deceitful person. Lo Yachlasle, and you're not gonna be able to outwin him. So Amalah. So Yaakov said, don't worry, I can do that. Achivanu. So he said that I'm the brother. I'm the brother of your father, meaning that I am on the same wavelength in terms of my ability to be conniving as well. But Ramos, I can do that. So Amalei. So she said, but wait a second, hold on. I thought you were a good shidduch. Umi shari the tzadiki the skliber amusa. Aren't you supposed to be a tzaddik? A tzaddik. Since when is a tzaddik allowed to engage in trickery? So Amalei, yeah, I can do that. It's a pasuk. He said. In Imnavati Tavar, it says if a person's pure, so you're pure with them. Mikesh Titapal, but if a person is crooked, so you're supposed to be crooked with them. So Amalah, Umayram Yusa. So he said, what's the trickery that you think your father's going to engage in that you're warning me about? So Amalei, so Rachel said, well, I think I have this older sister, Isli Aksa, the Kashisha Minai, Lominsivli Mikama, and he's going to figure out some way that he's not going to let me get married before her. So Masala Simanim, so therefore he gave her Simanim, certain ways that she'd be able to demonstrate on their conjugal night that it's really her and not Leah. Kimata Lelia. So then when the night came for him to get married, Rachel realized that Leah is not going to know the simanim, and that Leah is going to be very embarrassed when Yaakov is going to refuse to be with her and say, hey, wait a second, you're not Rachel, you're Leah. So Amahashna Mixafa, hey, my sister's going to be very embarrassed. Misatino Niala. So she gave all of the tricks and all of the simanim of how to identify herself to Leah. And that's why it says, Vahiba Bokir was only in the morning, Vinehi Leah, that Yaakov discovered that it was really Leah and it wasn't Rachel. So that teaches you that up until then, Yaakov really thought that it was Rachel. And let me talk simanim shemasa Rachel Leah, because of these different signs that Rachel had given over to Leah, there was supposed to be the special code to demonstrate that it was really Rachel. He didn't know until the morning that it was really Leah. So because of the fact that Rachel was so careful that she was engaged in this sort of secret that she was to spare her sister from embarrassment. So Shaul descended from her. The Rashi says tznius is that she gave over that she didn't tell this issue about the simanim that Yaakov had given over to her, so that this way she was able to engage, secretly in this ruse. Because the more public it had been, if it would have been something that was very, very public, so then it would have been, much more difficult to engage in this ruse, because it would have, been known that somebody else would have known about the simanim and somebody else could have employed the simanim. So because of the fact that she was known by Yaakov to be so discreet, so he wouldn't have suspected that somebody else would know about the simanim. That's the way that Rashi explains it. Umad snius, haisa a bit. The more careful you are in terms of your discretion, so the more people rely upon you. So the reason that Rachel was relied upon so much by Yaakov was precisely because of the fact that she was so discreet. What was the tznius that Shaul demonstrated? That after Shaul had been appointed, he had been anointed by Shmuel as the next king. But it was in a private ceremony, so he was really on a mission to find some lost donkeys of his father. So then he came across his uncle, and he told his uncle, "Oh, I found the donkeys that my father was missing." But he didn't tell him, "Oh, by the way, I was appointed king." Asher Amar Shmuel, that Shmuel had said, "You're king." So he didn't tell him that because he figured this wasn't, a necessary occasion to divulge that information. He was just very, very private. So because he was so private, Zocher v'yotzas mimenu Esther. So therefore, he was Zocher. Because of his general privacy. We find that he was private in other contexts too. The Navi tells us that when he would go to the bathroom, he would do it in a very, very private way, that he generally conducted himself very privately. So therefore, what? It was Nechbel Kalim wasn't necessarily considered to be, that wasn't considered to be so meritorious. Like at a certain point, when he was publicly declared the king, so then he was supposed to act in a more public fashion. So we're bringing, that was like his undoing, right? That's correct. So here we're mentioning, so there were aspects of his modesty that were virtuous, but there were aspects that weren't as virtuous. We're not mentioning that one. So Zochar v'Yotzas mimenu Esther, so that's why he was Zochar that Esther should be a descendant of him. Amar Rabbi Elazar, that when a Kadosh Baruch Hu declares greatness for a person, it's for all future generations, like it says in that pasuk that we quoted earlier in Iyov, Lo yigvar mitzadik einav, that v'yoshivim lanetzach v'yigbo. That's v'yoshivim lanetzach, that he's established like forever in a great position. V'yigbo, and he's raised up. You have to be careful not to let it go to your head, though. When you're raised up, im hegis daito, Kadosh Baruch Hu mashpilo. If you're too high and haughty. So then HaKadosh Baruch Hu lowers the person, Shnei Amar, because the next pasuk says, Masurim bezikim, that the person will be bound in chains. Mama Mordechai Esther osa. So then Esther did everything that Mordechai told her. We're continuing in the psukim, right? We're still in Parak Beis. Amar b'yemia shahaisa mara damnida l'chachamim. That she would do mama chachamim. That if she had damnida, when she wanted to be with Mordechai, she didn't have to wait when she was with Achashverosh. So she could be a nida, But when she was with Achashverosh, but with Mordechai, there were laws of Taras and Mishpacha, so she had to show her damnida to the chachamim. Hashir haisabi amna ito. She was faithful. So Amar Rabba bar Alema shaiso menes michekel shel Achashverosh, that she would go out from being with Achashverosh, which was of course against her will. And then she would immerse herself both from the contamination of being with this non-Jew, and also in case she had been a nida, she would make sure to immerse herself. And then she would immediately be with Mordechai. So says the Tosas, what about Havchana? You need a 3-month period to make sure that any child that was born, there wouldn't be any confusion whether the child was from Achashverosh or Mordechai. So he said, don't worry, she used birth control. When she was with Achashverosh, she used a diaphragm. So therefore, she didn't have to do Havchana. She didn't have to wait 3 months before being with Mordechai. By Yemim Ha'em, Mordechai. Okay, well, you know, you do what you got to do. By Mordechai Yosef B'Shar HaMelech, in those days, Mordechai was sitting in the gate of the king. Katsa, big son Meseresh. So the big son Meseresh, two of the ministers hatched up a plot to assassinate the king. We know what happened. So Amar Rabbi Barabba, Rabbi Yochanan, Hiksef Kadosh Baruch Hu Adonai Alabadav Lasos Son Tzaddik. That a Kadosh Baruch Hu, he mixes things up a little bit in order to do the desire of his subjects. For Yosef's sake, so he got Paro angry at his servants, right? The Sarah Mashkim, the Sarah Open, Manu Yosef, Shenema Vishami Tanu Navi Bri B'Goymer, that when those ministers were in prison, Yosef was with them. It was all part of a divine plan that this would enable Yosef to get out of prison. Abadim al Adonai, and sometimes he would make the servants upset at their master. Lasos Nes Latzadik, to make a Nes Latzadik. In this case, the man of Mordechai, it was Mordechai. The Ksiv, Vayivadar Davar Mordechai, that the big son Meseresh had decided to assassinate Achashverosh, so that Mordechai would find out of the plot, would say about the plot, and would save Achashverosh, and then that would come back to help to rescue the Jews when Achashverosh would be reminded of this incident, and he would say, "Oh, I have to honor Mordechai," and there's the beginning of the downfall of Haman. So Rabbi Yochanan, big son Meseresh were from a nation called the Tarsiim, Shnei Tarsiim Havu, and they had a special language that nobody understood. They were very upset because they said since Esther came into the king's life, he was with her all night and he had to constantly drink, in order to entertain himself. And therefore, they couldn't go to sleep at night because he was constantly calling for them to bring drinks. So Bavanatil Eres Besefo, come, let's kill Achashverosh. Let's put some poison in his bowl. So that he'll die. But they didn't know Mordechai was right there in the courtyard of the king with them. That he was somebody from the great Sanhedrin, where you have to know all the languages. You got to know 70 languages. So he knew what they were saying. So some bring this as a raya for Torah Umada, that you see that, if you know secular subjects, so like languages, so then you'll be able to save the Jewish people. Some bring this as a raya against Torah Umada. It was only because Jews in general didn't learn secular subjects that they felt comfortable talking around Mordechai. So So the big son said to Zeresh, or the other one, we don't have the same watches, so that one of us is in courtyard A during the time that the other one's in courtyard B, and when the other one's in courtyard B, the second one is in courtyard A. And we need a time that one of them will be free, that they could bring the poison to the one who's in the courtyard. So Amalo, this is how the Maharsha explains the conversation. So Amalo, Ani Yeshua Mishmarti Mishmartachas. The other one said, no problem. For a period of time, I will cover both courtyard A and courtyard B. I'll go back and forth between both courtyards, so I'll cover both, and then you'll be free and you'll be able to bring me the poison during that time. That's why it was said that they found that when they investigated, that it was in fact the case that there was a plot afoot. Because they looked and they saw that they weren't both in their respective places. Only one of them was going back and forth. And after these events transpired, now we're at the beginning of Paragimel. So Amarava Akash Baruch Hu after Kadosh Baruch Hu came up with the vaccination, so then he imposed the illness. The Amar Reish Lakish Ein Kadosh Baruch Hu Makes Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu only causes the injury if there already is a remedy that has been prepared beforehand. Elim Kain Bori Lehem Refuah Techila. Shenamar, as it says, that this is a pasuk in Hosea. Israel, when I cure the Jewish people, when on Ephraim, the sin of Ephraim was revealed, meaning that then it was time to punish Ephraim when there was already a cure in store. But with the nations of the world, it's the other way around. First, he afflicts them, and only afterwards is there a remedy which is concocted. Now go for Apo, that a Kadosh Baruch will afflict Mitzrayim. First they'll be afflicted, and then only afterwards will there be a remedy. Was said, Mordecai, for not bowing down to him, he didn't want to punish him alone. He wanted to punish his entire nation. First Mordecai, and then he wanted to punish the nation. What's the Am Mordecai? The Am Mordecai are the rabbis. He was a rabbi. And then at the end, he wanted to go after all of the Jews, right? Am Mordechai, and then it says Vayivakesh Shaman Lashminas Kol Yudim. After it says Am Mordechai, it says Kol Yudim. He built poor Hu Agoral, and he drew lots. So Tana Kimin Shanafal poor B'Chodesh Adar. The lot came out that the day that the lot came out upon him to kill the Jew, to destroy the Jewish people was in Chodesh Adar. So he was very happy about that. Samach Simcha Gedayla. Amanapali poor B'Yak Shemeis B'Moshe. He says this is the month that Moshe died because he figured out from the Psukim that it says that the people went up in the 10th day of Nisan, Yisrael Chodesh Rishon and Yeshua. There were 30 days of mourning for Moshe. There were 3 days that they prepared Seder L'derech. So he figured out that it was on the 7th day of Adar that Moshe must have died. But he didn't have psukim that would tell him that Moshe was also born on the 7th day of Adar. Shiva b'Adar meis, Shiva b'Adar nolad. So he didn't realize it was also an auspicious day that Moshe, that the 7th day of Adar, because it's the day that Moshe was born as well. So yesh no am echad. So he said to Achashverosh, there's one nation. Amar Leka, the other Lishna Bishika Haman. Haman was a master speaking Lashon Hara. Amalei Haman said to Achashverosh, son of Klina, let's kill them. Let's destroy them. So Amalei was the Pina Melokav. So Achashverosh said, and I'm afraid of their God. I don't want him to do to me what he did to Paro and to Sancherib. So Amalei Yeshna Min Mitzvos. He said, don't worry, they're sleeping from performing mitzvahs. They have no zechuyos anymore. So Amalei Yispu B'Rabbanan. So he said, but what about the rabbis? They just made like a whole Buddha convention. So Amalei Amechadeh. So he said, no, everybody's sleeping. The rabbis are responsible for the people. The people are observing mitzvahs, so the rabbis also don't count. So Shema Toma Korkani Oisam Achuscha, you'll say that our coils are like a portion of your malchus to become bald and to become completely empty by virtue of destroying people in a particular region. Don't worry, because it's only like a little bit here and a little bit there. They're scattered amongst all of your nations, so it will hardly even be noticeable. Shema Tome Isa Naminayo, you'll say you get some benefit from them. Nah, they're like a capre, they're like a mule. That doesn't bear any fruit. But Shema Tome Ika Medinta Minayo, you'll say that you can put them in like some small province somewhere. I know there's so many of them, all over the place that you wouldn't be able to fit them in a small province. And that they're different in the way their practices are different from the rest of the nation. They don't eat our food. And they don't marry from us. And they don't let us go if we want to give them our women. They're not interested in any kind of intermarriage. For their women to marry our men, or for our women to be allowed to marry their men. And they don't do anything that you ask them to do. If there's a particular type of malacha that you want to be performed by people, so you know what they say, the mafki l'kula shasa b'shoy pai. So they always say, it's almost Shabbos, it's almost Pesach, I have no time for this. Lamelech ain't shaveh la'anicham, and therefore, that by Shabbos yom Pesach hayom. Lamelech ain't shaveh la'anicham, ta'aklu v'shasu mavzulei l'malchus. And they eat and they drink, but they treat you disgracefully, because they don't care if a fly falls into their wine, they'll just pluck out the fly and they'll drink the rest of the wine. But if you would touch their kos of wine, they throw the whole thing out. They throw it on the ground. They're not going to drink any of it. So they treat you more disrespectfully than a fly. If it's good, right to kill them more. But I'll give you 10,000 tablets of silver. Money talks. Haman was up to this plan. Therefore, he gave the refuah that he established that we should be zayche, not to be harmed by his shkolim, by virtue of donating our own shkolim to the Beis Hamikdash every year. And specifically during that month that he wanted to destroy the Jews, Chodesh Adar, the Fikach Hiktim Shiklan the Shiklav. At the first day of Adar, that's when we begin contributing the shkalim to the Beis Hamikdash, and that's also when word goes out to check the fields to make sure there's no kilayim growing, so that we can get rid of kilayim. King said, I don't need your money. I'm happy for you to eradicate the Jews. Who is this similar to? Wait, I have 19 minutes. One of them has a mound in their field. The other one has a ditch. The one with the ditch wants to have the mound. The one with the mound wants a ditch to put it in. I'll pay good money for it. The Yom they find each other, and it's a good shidduch. The one with the ditch says, give me your mound, sell me your mound. Take the mound. I was dying to have somebody who would, I would pay for to take the mound, so you can have it for free. That's great. So it's the same thing with Haman and Achashverosh. Each one wanted to get rid of the Jews. The king removed his ring. So this accomplished more than all of the Tochacha that was given by 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses. And you look at Rashi, he gives you the list of the 48 prophets, and you look at Rabbeinu Hanani, it's a different list, and everybody has a different list. That none of them were able to get them to do tshuva, but when they saw that the king they relied upon, Achashverosh, was giving over his ring to the bad man Haman who wanted to destroy them, so then they did tshuva. That woke them up. As we were saying, 48 Nevi'im and 7 Nevi'im, but Paksu below Hotiru, Amashikasta b'Torah, and they didn't add or subtract anything. So Eila Mitzvos, the Navi is not allowed to add or subtract the Torah. The one thing that they felt was appropriate to add was Chutz Mikvah Megillah. That on Purim, that people should read the Megillah. We should have a special yontif. My Dorish, what did they darshan that there should be a special yontif? So I'm an extra yontif, not mention the Torah. So I'm Rabbi Yeshua ben Koracham, Mami of this Chavis Amin and Shiva. They made a Kavachomer. The person can darshan a Kavachomer for themselves. That we said a Shiva as Yashir. But when we went from slavery to emancipation, Misa l'chaim, so now we were saved from death to life. Of course, again, how much more so we should say some sort of shiva. So that's why they felt that it was appropriate, based on principles of the Torah, to enact a new holiday. So why stop at Mikvah Megillah? Why don't we actually recite Hallel on Purim? Because we don't say Hallel with respect to a nes. This is Rabbi Yitzchak. We don't say Hallel with respect to a nes that takes place outside of Israel. Yitzias Mitzrayim, the nation Chutzlar Sekambirin. Then how do we say Hallel over Yitzias Mitzrayim? So Shiva, Haki Amin and Shiva. The Tanya, how could they say even as Yashar? The Tanya, the answer is that before we entered into Israel and we were settled in Israel, so then everybody could say Shiva. But once we were settled in Israel, then you couldn't say Hallel based on a miracle outside of Israel. Rav Nachman gives a different answer. That the reciting of Megillah Esther, that is Hallel. That does count as Hallel. So Rabba says that the reason you don't say Hallel is because in the case where we had Yitzias Mitzrayim, so we were really safe from power. We were no longer the servants of power. It's not true. Even after we were saved from Haman, we still were servants of Achashverosh. Because the Achashverosh on it. First thing he did afterwards was to impose a big tax on everybody. So Bein Rav Nachman, so Rav and Rav Nachman, who both say that Hallel either is recited to Megillah Esther or could have been recited if we wouldn't have been after Achashverosh, but it's in Chutz La'aretz. So Akasha, Ba'atanya, didn't the Bryce say that once we came into Israel, then you can't say Hallel based on what happens outside of Israel. Kim and Shigalo. So they would say, no, that was only when we were settled in Israel. But once we were still part of that Golos, this was still part of Golos Babel, the tail end of Golos Babel. Kim and Shigalo, because of that Sher and Arisha, we went back to the original principle. They could say Hallel for something that happens to the Chutz La'aretz. It was too late. You mean to say there were no other Nevi'im, only 48? That there was this Ish Elkanah, who was from the Ramasayim. He was one of Masayim, who were Sofim, who were Nevi'im. Echem Masayim Sofim. He was one out of 200 Nevi'im. So he said, yeah, Mihava Tupa Hava. Yeah, you're right. There were lots and lots of Nevi'im. Because the Tanya have a Nevi'im, there were 1,200,000 Nevi'im. But when we record the Nevi'im here in this list of 48, it's only those Nevi'im that gave a prophecy that was required for all generations. That if it wasn't required for all generations, it wasn't written down. These are the Nevi'im that gave prophecies that were required for all generations, and therefore were suitable to be written down. Then once we're on the subject of this Ishmin Messiah Makana, he was somebody who came from the hills. That there were hills that you could see from one hill to the next hill. That's why it says he came from a Messiah. It doesn't necessarily mean that he came from 200 prophets. That he came from people who are Ramah, who were very, very high up. They were lofty. And who were these lofty people? They were the children of Korach. They were in a very lofty place in Gehinnom. B'nai Korach, they didn't die. Even though everybody went into the abyss, that there was a high place that was established them in Gehinnom, where they were able to somehow live and have children. It's a little confusing. And that's where they were able to remain alive. Who were the 7 prophetesses? So Sarah, Miriam, and Baruch, Abigail, Chulda, Esther. That's 7. Sarah the Ksiv, how do we know Sarah? Avi Milka, Babi Yiska, because it says that she's described as Yiska. She said, that's Sarah. That she was able to see through the Ruach HaKodesh. That's why she's called Yizka. That whatever Sarah says, Abraham should listen to her, that she had Neviah, that she had Nevuah. So other explanation, Yizka, that everybody would stare at her. I'm sorry, Yofia, period. Miriam's second prophetess. Why is she prescribed when she was singing and playing instruments and she was Sayam as the sister of Aaron, not the sister of Moshe? Because she was, when only Aaron was alive, she's the one who gave the prophecy that her mother was going to give birth to the man who would, to the leader who would save the Jewish people. And when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, so the entire house lit up. So I'm going to be here. So her father Amram said, Benishka Rosha, he kissed her on her head. I see that he really is. This boy is really going to be the future leader. He said the whole of the house is lit up with his with the radiance of his Shekhinah. So your nevuah came true. Once they had to throw him into the sea, I'm going to be of a top Rosha. So then her father got up and slapped her on the head. Where's your nevuah? If we have to get rid of him, so then it turns out that he's not our savior. That as we just read in the parasha, that the sister said that Miriam stood at a distance to see what's going to be. So she wanted to see how her nevuah was going to come true. The Torah says with respect to the Torah, wife of Lapidos, that she would make wicks for the base of Mikdash. V'yosheves, that's Lapidos, psilos for the base of Mikdash. V'yosheves tachas toimer, and she sat underneath the date palm. Ma'isnat tachas toimer. Amar Mishimon ben Avshalom Mishim Yichud. That a tomer doesn't have branches that stick out and that droop down to the bottom. So this way, she will meet with people that wouldn't be yichud. Just like a palm tree only has one spine, it doesn't spread out. So to the Jews in those days, they only had one heart for their father in heaven. But she would sit down and she would give people counsel based on her nevuah. That's the idea. Okay. And it says, I'm sorry, it says Dvorah Isha Neviah. You don't need to dash. It just says Isha Neviah. She was a prophetess. Chana says, but she said in her song, Chana, she said, my horn has been raised for Hashem, and my my heart exalts in Hashem, and my horn has been raised for Hashem. Allah be. So she gave a nevuah. She said that the horns, those are going to be raised up forever, but the flask will not be. David and Shlomo should have said in the future, David and Shlomo are going to be anointed with oil that's placed in a horn. So their kingdom is going to be forever. Who are going to be anointed with oil from a flask, and their kingdom is not going to last. Okay, there's a nevuah. Ain't Kadosh Hashem came built up, nobody says holy as Hashem. Then nobody that Kadosh Baruch Hu endures. So that's the idea. Nobody endures like Hashem. So people, their works outlast them. He outlasts all of his works. There's no artist like God. A person draws, a design, hieroglyphics on the wall. He can't provide wind and a soul and innards and intestines. He is able to design an embryo inside of another tzur, inside of another creation that he's made. And he's able to endow this embryo with breath and with soul and with inner organs and with intestines. Abigail, how do you know Abigail was in a Neviah? That she was greeting David, who wanted to kill her husband Navel, and she went down. She descended in the confines of the mountain. Say so. I mean, harm me by late. She says she came from the mountain. She'll be coming from the mountain when she comes. Why does it say that she's coming from the confines of the mountain? So then it means that she was coming to David to show him a merit, that she had a merit that she had to show to a chacham in terms of damida, habamina sitarim, which comes from the inner parts of her body, not the dami rasalo. David Melch he was the rob. He had to paskin on her merit. So so he said to her, "What? You know that I can only look in a mirror in the sunlight. So I'm a he done in the name of but you want to kill my husband Novel tonight, at this night. You can't be done in Vashis tonight. So I'm Allah. So he said, Moed b'malchusu. So he said, but he's a Moed b'malchus. He rebelled against me. I don't need a regular din Torah. So I'm Allah, Dayan Shokayim. He says, no, because Shaul is still alive, and people don't necessarily know of you as the Melch yet. So I'm Allah. So he said, okay, fine. So I'm not going to kill him. You save me from blood. You save me from blood. So damim tarti mashma. So it sounds like the blood. So there were two types. So it sounds like it's the plural. He didn't say you save me from one blood. You save me from multiple blood. And so this teaches you Shaika that she went that she had to reveal her thigh. Marsha says it so he can paskin properly on the damida. But then he got so excited he ran after her 3 parsos. Amala Ashmili, and he wanted to have relations with her. So Amalo, she said no. This should not be a stumbling block for you because my husband's still alive. So therefore he did not have relations with her. So Zos, but she was prophesying that in the future there would be a different situation. Then just that Zos won't be a puka, but there would be another situation where he would stumble. That there would be another situation of dam. I said the Basheva that he's going to become culpable for sinning with another woman, namely Basheva. And that's what ended up happening. So therefore, we see that she was in a via. Now she had and she said that you should be bound in the bond of life. When she was departing from him, and she was happy that he spared the life of her husband Novel, but he only lasted that night. He died the next morning from the shock of when he heard of everything that happened. So Amalei Beitiv Hashem Laduni B'Sachartes Samasek. Don't forget about me. So Amam Nachman Hanadami Inshi. So that's why we have the expression Isas Sabadi Shusa Pilka, that a woman handles the spindle while she talks, meaning that she spins a ball of yarn that she is looking out for her future, even as she's engaged in another activity. She's saving her husband, but she's also looking out for herself that David should think of her after her husband dies. Somebody in the back, one of the portion in the back said that wasn't really a proper thing for her to do. They give another mashal that a goose, works with its head down, but its eyes are looking up. She's on the one hand, she's continuing with her husband, but her eyes are looking towards the future. Chulda, how do we Chulda was a prophetess? Chulda Nevi'i, as the Imam Psachim says, that there was a delegation from the house of Yoshio after they started to do tshuva. They read from the Mishnah Torah, so they went to see if something could be done about their sins, that they shouldn't have to go into Golos, and they went to Chulda. Well, Malcolm Yirmiyahu was alive in those days, so why did they go to Chulda? Malcolm the guy Yirmiyahu was nabi. How could she prophesy? So made the Rav Chulda. He didn't mind if she was a prophetess because she was a relative. She had protexia. Therefore, he didn't mind if she also would prophesy at the same time as him. But Yoshio, why did he send this delegation to Chulda and not to Yirmiyahu? So the Bei Rabbi Shalom was saying because she was very compassionate. The Maharsha says not that would mean that she would give a false prophecy, but if the prophecy would be bad, she would beg a Kodesh Baruch Hu more to turn it around for good. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yirmiyahu lo hava hasam. Rabbi Yochanan says no, Yirmiyahu wasn't there. He was busy bringing back the Bnei Israel from India. He was bringing back the Aseres Hashvatim. How do we know that the Aseres Hashvatim temporarily came back to the land of Israel? Because there's a prophecy that Yechezkel said that we're not going to have the laws of Yovel anymore, that the lands will return to the seller at the Yovel year. But Yechezkel was afterwards. If the Yovel was already batel because the 10 tribes had gone into exile, so you didn't have Kol Yishmael anymore. So why is he prophesying that the Yovel is going to become is going to go away? The Navim is not be Allah. If the Yovel already had been extinguished, and this teaches us that Yirmiyah actually brought back the 10 tribes temporarily. Yoshio ben Ammon Malchalan. Yoshio was temporarily the king over the entire Israel. It's just that then they all went into exile again, and the Yovel therefore was abolished yet again. Because Yoshio, when he was going around and getting rid of avodah zaras and the like, so he said, "What is this tombstone that I see in this place?" This is the grave of an Isha Elokim. His name was Ido. Ashebami Yehuda, and he can't come from Yehuda. And he was giving Musar to Yerovim ben Nebat when he built his idolatrous temple in Beis El. And this is and he predicted all the things that you ended up doing to the Mizbeach of Beis El, because he predicted that the Mizbeach would eventually be destroyed. What's Yoshio doing in Beis El? Beis El was in the kingdom of Israel.
And Yoshia eventually became the king not only of Yehuda but of all Yisrael. That temporarily Yirmiyahu actually brought back the 10 tribes, and that's why they were able to observe temporarily Yovel again. Rabbi Nachman learns from here. It says Gam Yehuda Shas Katzilak Shusami that Yehuda, the kingdom of Yehuda, has planted a branch of yours in bringing back the exile. So we see that the exile was temporarily brought back. Esther, anyone know Esther was a prophetess. And the third day she wore the royal the royal clothing. Big day malchus the royal clothing. It should say big day clothes. El Shavashte means that she wore the Ruach HaKodesh, the royal spirit. And it says with respect to the nephew of David that he was that the Ruach HaKodesh came over him as he was explaining that he was really there when David was running away from Shaul, that he was really on David's side. So Amram Nachman that it's not good for women to be haughty. Tati Nashi Hiram, there were two women who were otherwise, good women, but they became haughty. Pavyon, Misanya, and Shemayu, and therefore they were given derogatory names. Chadeshma Zigorta, one of them was called a bee, of a Chadeshma Kokushta, and one of them was called a rat. Zigorta Ksiba Batishlach Batikwa Barak, with respect to Devorah. Devorah called Barak, Lo Asla Legabe. And she didn't, go personally. She sent for him rather than personally going to him, and therefore she's referred to as a ziporta. That was considered to be a haughty thing for her to do. And kakushta and chulda is referred to as a kakushta. She said, "Go and tell that man," and she didn't say, "Go and tell the melech," because she's referring to Yoshia. So therefore she acted haughtily. So we refer to her as kakushta. Okay, so I'm a Rav Nachman because Devorah is like a bee. Right, that's the idea. Devorah means a bee, and Chulda means a rat, means like a weasel. Nachman Chulda minei Banim shel Yoshua. Nachman says Chulda was from the great, from the grandchildren, descendants of Yoshua. Sivaka ben Charchas. It says with respect to her lineage, because it says Esha Shalom ben Tikva ben Charchas. And it says Yoshua was buried in his hometown Charas. Esha Yovena Saba. The Rav Nachman Shmonim Bimim Kohanim Yasim Rakov Azona. Beluin, which says, but there were descendants who came from Rachab, and she's listed as one of the descendants, not of Yoshua, but rather of Rachab. It says Neria, Barak, Rosaria, Maxia, Yimya, Chilkia, Chanamel, Bishalom, and Rabbi Yehuda Omer Afkulda. And Rabbi Yehuda adds even Chulda that she came from Rachab, not that she came from Yoshua. So there's an easy answer to this, right? Afkulda Neviah, Bnei Banesh Rachab is on Isaac. Sivaka ben Tikva, because it says here that she was her lineage. It says Esha Shalom ben Tikva, and there it says with respect to Rachel Sivasam as Tikvas Chutashani, she left out the scarlet thread as a sign that when they could come to conquer Israel, that the spies would know where she lived. Everybody would see where she lived, and therefore they would spare. So Amalei Eina Saba. So he responded to him. He responded to Rav Nachman. Responded to Rav Eina Saba. He said Eina Saba. V'amila Pasi Uchma. Well, he said, you black earthenware vessel, meaning you're like a Tamachokim who never has time to wash his clothes, meaning we knock the time Shmaita. Between you and me, we'll be able to figure out what happened. The Gaira, because she converted, but now so Yeshua, and Yeshua married her. So therefore, Chulda came from that union of both Yeshua and Rachel. He have a Yeshua, but the Yeshua have children, have Nun, but no Yeshua, but no. It says that when we're giving the generations, it says Nun was an only child, Yeshua was the child, and then it ends. He didn't have any sons after him. So he said, yeah, he didn't have any sons. Benilo Havale, Bantan Havale. He didn't have sons, but he had daughters. Therefore, he was able to have descendants to his daughters. Lenir. Okay.